Hi guys, Mike with Tactical. Just want to talk with you briefly about October being Fire Prevention Month. And with that, we're going to talk about fire extinguishers in the workplace, inspecting them, what kinds of fire extinguishers to use, and how to operate one if you need to. There's several different kinds of fire extinguishers that are available. There's pressurized water cans, there's carbon dioxide extinguishers, but the most common we see are the ABC dry chemical extinguishers like the one that I have here. Different categories of fires require different kinds of extinguishing agents. A Class A fire is normal combustibles and can be put out with water or a dry chemical extinguisher. A Class B fire is a flammable liquids fire and requires a special extinguisher. A Class C fire is an electrical fire and typically will use a carbon dioxide or a dry chemical extinguisher for those. Class D fires are combustible metals and Class K fires are cooking oils, and they require their own type of fire extinguisher as well. Most of the dry chemical extinguishers we have on site are capable of putting out A, B, and C type fires. The way that a dry chemical fire extinguisher works is it has a pressurized gas container inside just underneath the neck. This is the most common point of failure when we inspect the extinguisher, and you can usually tell from the gauge whether or not there's pressure remaining inside. When you pull the pin and depress the handle, the fire extinguisher discharges a dry powder, and it works just the same way as putting dirt or powder over the top of a fire, extinguishing it by smothering it away from the oxygen. The powder inside most dry chemical fire extinguishers is either sodium or potassium bicarbonate, or it could be monoammonium phosphate. We shouldn't use those on chlorine fires or oxidizer fires because they can create explosive situations or possibly even release some toxic gases. We need to inspect our fire extinguishers monthly and service them annually. Typically there's a tag on the fire extinguisher that indicates when it was last serviced professionally, and then on the back side of the extinguisher tag there's month-by-month boxes that you can fill in to indicate that you have in fact inspected that fire extinguisher. When we go to inspect a fire extinguisher, we want to look at a couple different things. We want to make sure that the fire extinguisher is mounted properly and marked correctly, and that there's no obstructions to get to the fire extinguisher in the event we needed it. We want to do an exterior check of the fire extinguisher and make sure there's no obvious damage, and check the gauge. Make sure that the nozzle doesn't have any obstructions or debris in it. We also want to check the gauge and make sure that it's in the green area, indicating that it still has pressure, and that the pin is in place and retained so that it doesn't accidentally get discharged. One last thing, when you're doing an inspection, it doesn't hurt to take the fire extinguisher and loft it and make sure it feels about the right weight with powder in it. Flip it upside down and tap the bottom with a rubber mallet. That keeps the extinguishing agent loose in the event that you have to use it. If you have to deploy a fire extinguisher, which we always try to make sure we do prevention on the front end rather than having to, we want to use the PASS acronym to deploy the fire extinguisher. That stands for pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep. We're going to pull the pin, we're going to aim the fire extinguisher nozzle, we're going to squeeze the handle, and we're going to sweep back and forth towards the fire, making sure that we aim at the base of the fire and not the elevated flames. This ensures that the dry chemical powder gets to the part of the fire that will actually be smothered. We also want to be careful not to splash or cause liquids to move into other areas or cause the fire to get larger. Anytime we're using a fire extinguisher, we always want to have a safe escape path. We want to know which direction is safe for us to exit in, and we never turn our back on a fire even after it's extinguished. We want to make sure that we walk away from it carefully, watching our step behind us, but also making sure that the fire doesn't reignite. The last thing is, once the fire extinguisher has been used, lay it on its side to indicate that that fire extinguisher has already been deployed so that someone else doesn't come up and think that it still has powder in it. Remember that if you have any questions about this, you can look at OSHA Regulation 1910.157. That's the fire extinguisher standard. And make sure that for Fire Prevention Month, you're getting your inspections done, and that you go over this with your employees and make sure that they've all been trained in the right way to use a fire extinguisher.